Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Darrell Patterson. In his TV days covering sports, Darrell was part of the #1 anchor team in Chattanooga on News Channel 9 over a 40-year broadcast career. He is a member of the Greater Chattanooga Sports Hall of Fame and the Tennessee Journalism Hall of Fame. Darrell, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before I ask you how you're able to hit a golf ball from the wrong side, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Good morning, Mike. It's good to be back with you again.
It's been a long time.
Don't put me through the same things that you put me through during all of those years at News Channel 9, would you?
Oh, I thought those were joyous years.
We had a great run. Did we ever? Did we ever? I'm telling you. It is good to be back with you again in the same room, different atmosphere, but it's we've come a long way, baby.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of things together, and I got to tell you, you and some of the other folks who were at Channel 9 before me really made my job a lot easier. You accepted me, and you taught me some things that I didn't know, and you were always there to support me, and I appreciate that.
Well, we had a series of good leaders at that place. I went to work there in 1975.
You're not that old.
I was 9 years old at the time.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And I got a work release program from the kindergarten and came on out. Now, we had some great, from top down, general managers, talent, different people in different places. It's kind of like we joined hands and we learned things together.
Yeah.
Like whatever we were doing back in 1975 was not right. In 1976, it started being really right.
Well, there was a great camaraderie with it all.
Absolutely.
Let me go back and ask you a question to start it off. What's in your morning cup? What do you usually drink?
Coffee out of the Keurig. It's usually a Starbucks blend, 1 Park Roast, and then 1 decaf, with a little milk and a little bit of honey.
Ooh,
Used to be sugar. I went to honey.
Why'd you go to honey?
I figured it was better for me than the sugar was.
Yeah.
And I love honey. Dad used to raise bees
when
I was a kid. So I've been doing the honey thing my entire life.
So you bring up your dad, and one of the things I always note when I think of Darrell Patterson is you have a fondness for saying Mac-Minn County.
Mac-Minn County. Here's the deal. If you're born and raised in and around Athens, Etowah, Englewood, in that area, you are from Mac-Minn County. If you're from outside that place, it's Mac-Minn County. But being from Mac-Minn County, two of your bordering counties are Polk, not Polk, and Maggs, not Meigs.
Maggs?
So it's Mac-Minn, Polk, and Meigs County.
Where the hell did you grow up?
That's the kind of upbringing I had.
Yeah.
And I tried never to get above that raisin.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, and fortunately, I've known you a good while, and I know a little bit about your backstory, but that's what I want to talk about. You're the 5th of 6 boys. What's it like to grow up as the 5th of 6 boys in Mac-Minn County? I mean, you guys had.
Can you imagine how old those clothes were by the time they got to me?
You know what? I identify with you. I'm the middle of 7.
There you go.
At least you had all boys. I was wearing dresses at one point.
Yeah, my old, we were just 6 boys. My oldest brother was born in 1935. And my youngest brother was born in 1951. So there was that big of a gap in between oldest and youngest. And, boy, I miss them. There's one left.
Oh, wow.
There's me and my younger brother, Panky. And I
remember Panky. I met him at your golf game.
Yes.
And I love that name, too.
Yeah. Well, his name is Harold, just like Darrell, but Mother changed it to an H instead of a D. She said we ran out of names. We were expecting a girl.
So he chose Panky.
My oldest brother had the advantage of giving everyone in the family nicknames. And I had one brother nicknamed Bruno. And if you go to Athens, Tennessee to this day, and you ask if anybody there knows or knew Jerry Patterson.
Not a chance.
Not a chance. What did you know? Maybe Bruno. Oh, yes. Well, that was Jerry. You go and say, do you know Harold Patterson? That's Darrell's brother. No, I know Panky.
Exactly.
That would be the same thing. And that's the way it was in our family.
Well, and that begs the question, what did he give you as a nickname?
Mine never stuck. Pat? Typical from Patterson.
Yeah.
And that was my nickname in when I played high school football, it was Pat. Duty. They tried that one, and my aunt loved it, but she was the only one that ever called me Duty. Nobody else ever did. And it was Darrell with everybody else. And then DP, of course, all my life, which has been DP. Yeah,
which is pretty much what everyone around the station called you.
When Dennis Haskins and I hooked up back in the 70s, and when we started putting UTC basketball games on the air, Dennis came up with DP double play. So he always called me double play and was the only person in the world that ever called me double play. So if I ever heard a reference to my name as being double play, I knew it was Dennis, and that's where it came from.
What a great sports nickname, too.
Yeah, it really was.
So you had to grow up loving sports and just you and your brothers, you could field a team almost.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we could. We played in our family and in my little, I guess you call it a neighborhood. It was out in the country. We lived out near the Mayfield farm, which is, if you're in Athens, you know where Mayfield's is, and their farm. We lived across. In fact, my dad was one of the first employees that Mayfield's ever had. Tom and Scott hired him like in 1950 when they actually started that. So we've been friends and business associates with the Mayfield family forever. Scotty and I grew up together. But our little community, and, it's one of those little country communities where you have literally a dirt road, and you have about 20 or 30 houses. It was from Athens here to Inglewood here, and all the houses in between, and a church in between. So we all go to church together, and sometimes we eat Sunday lunch together at somebody's house, whether they know it or not. We're all going to that particular house to eat Sunday. Then after that, about 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, we go up to Clifford Slack's farm. He has a big pasture field out there. And depending on what time of year it is, we're going to play softball or we're going to play football. And we'll have 30 or 40 people out there. So from the time I'm 6, 7 years old, Sunday afternoons is playing football or softball up at Clifford Slack's pasture. Now, and it was that way forever.
What's the age difference between you and Panky?
3 years.
3 years. So that had to work to your advantage in playing because you weren't the youngest. You weren't the baby, but you were probably young enough playing with these older guys that it really toughened you up.
And we had some really, really good athletes there. My brother Bruno was probably the best athlete in the family. He was a great football player in high school. He was recruited to go play at LSU. But instead of going to LSU, he decided to go into the Air Force, where he played football, not at the Air Force Academy, but during his Air Force career, he played on the football team and sang in the Air Force choir and everything like that. But he never was hurt until a couple of weeks after he gets out of the Air Force and he's at home, and we go to Clifford Slack's pasture to play football. And Bruno jumps over the fence, catches his foot in the top railing of the fence, tore his knee up, and ended his career. But those are the kind of people that I was playing against and for during those cow pasture football and softball games on Sunday afternoon. So I learned the game. All of my brothers coached
Wow. So you.
Me, I was the broadcaster guy.
Well, and
I didn't know anything about coaching.
That's what I was going to say. You grew up in this sports atmosphere, so you developed the love of sports. But at a young age, you got it. What 4-H got you into public speaking?
Yep. Literally went to a 2-room school.
Yeah.
Literally a little place called Mount Harmony, which is between Athens and Niota.
I've never heard of Mount Harmony.
The school is no longer there. They closed it down literally a year after I left. Actually, there's a church there and the school. It was a little 2-room school. Mm-hmm. And the reason I went to school there is because that's where the bus went. The bus picked me up in front of the house, and it goes to Mount Harmony to school.
So that's where you went.
I'm 2 miles from Athens. Mm-hmm. From downtown Athens, I'm 2 miles. I'm 6 miles up to Mount Harmony, but that's where I went to school. It was a county school. If you lived outside the city, you had to pay a tuition to go to one of the city schools. Well, my dad couldn't afford no tuition. Mm-hmm. I was the 5th or 6th. We had to be fair to everybody, right? So we rode the bus. We go to Mount Harmony, and it's a little 2-room school. My graduating class there was the biggest graduating class they ever had. There was 13 of us.
Wow. So you went there through high school?
No, I went there through 8th grade, and then go to high school.
Then high school.
Talk about a culture shock.
I bet.
Yeah. I go to Mac-Minn County High School and had 1,200 students. We had 40 at Mount Harmony in grades 1 through 8. 40. We sat in the same desk for 7 hours. I go to high school where there's 1,200 people, and I've got to change desks every hour when the bell rings, go to another. So that was a culture shock.
I bet.
But the whole thing at Mount Harmony was the first, second, and third grades were in one room, one teacher. So she teaches first grade for a little while, second grade for. So if you're in first grade, you're learning third grade stuff because you're just same thing 4 through 8.
Yeah. Osmosis.
We move in the other. We learned that too. Yeah, that was right there with arithmetic. In 4th grade, I got into the 4-H club because you know, everybody does 4-H.
Yeah.
It's like, which subject do you want to do in 4-H club? Because I pledge my head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to better service for my club, my community, and my country. Why do I remember that 4-H pledge to this day? But I do. I got into yard improvement or something like that because the house where we lived, we didn't have a yard. We had rocks. Mm-hmm. So I was in charge of mowing the rocks, moving them from one place to another. And then they added public speaking. I can do that. So in 5th grade, I got into public speaking, entered the public speaking contest and won it, and went to the state and went to that's along the line in that. I know he's probably been a guest on your show at some time, John Germ.
Oh, yeah.
John was JC's. Before that, he was in 4-H and all of that stuff. And that's where I met him back then, was when I was doing public speaking in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the 4-H club, winning public speaking contest. At first, my teacher actually wrote my speeches. They were 3 to 4 minute speeches. And then it was like, you need to start putting these together yourself.
Put it in your voice.
Take, the ingredients that I've shown you here of how to do this. Now you do it. And then she would modify that and help that. And I was writing my own speeches and doing my own speeches.
How did you gravitate towards that? And the reason I ask is because here you are, 5th grade, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Most people would rather die than speak in public. Yeah. And
I don't know.
You seem to thrive on it.
I don't have an answer to that. Speaking, in church where we went, it was a small country church. And you had your Sunday school and you had your training union and you had those sort of things. And it involved getting up and speaking or answering questions, at least in class. Same thing in where I went to school. Mm-hmm. You're with 4 grades and everybody is learning 4th and 8th grade stuff the same day. So you're involved in audience participation or class participation there. I was never one that was shy about answering or asking a question. Why does it fly? Why is there air to blow up basketballs? That's why, that. So I was always interested in that. I was always interested in talking and sharing my thoughts, my opinions, and telling people what was happening.
Yeah.
That's what, and always had a radio in my ear.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you growing up, because it seems a lot of people who got into broadcasting were the kids that had the radio in their ear, or lying in bed at night. You got the clear channel stations.
You're listening to WLS in Chicago. You're listening to Art Roberts and Dick Bianti and all of those legends.
So did you know at a young age that that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I did.
When did it click for you?
Oh, I don't.
That you said, I want to pursue this.
Probably as soon as I hit my teenage years, or maybe younger. I used to, and a good friend of mine, and I miss him so much, Johnny Perkle, who was the radio hero in Athens when I was growing up. He was on the radio station.
And every town had a Johnny Perkle. Wasn't that great?
They did.
Yeah.
I used to listen to the night guys on WLS in Chicago, and during the day I would listen to the local stations. This is even, Mike, when I was carrying my transistor radio around, and you younger kids can look up transistor on Wikipedia and you'll find out what a transistor radio is. It's kind of like an iPad or an iPhone or something like that.
It was podcasting before anyone could do it.
It really was, and you could change stations and all that other stuff. But they would let me do that in school, so I would listen to the radio, listen to the music, and I loved the music. I can tell you to this day the label, the artist, and about any song in the 60s. If you now take it, that was just my thing. And I could also tell you what Johnny Perkle and Dick Bianti's intro to that particular song was, because that's what intrigued me so much, that here is a guy sitting in Chicago, Illinois, talking into a microphone, and I'm in Athens, Tennessee, and I can hear him.
Yeah.
I can do that. And in Athens, I took it a step further. I can get on my bicycle and ride downtown the 2 miles to the radio station, walk upstairs and sit in a chair and watch Johnny Perkle play radio.
How old were you when you started doing that?
About 12.
About 12?
11 or 12 years old.
And they embraced you? You were...
Bill Atkins, who was the general manager at the time, he was kind of like, what are you doing here? Where are your parents? Yeah. But then he got to know me and like, hi, Darrell, how you doing? Your chairs are right over there.
Well, they start to embrace you once they know you're there for...
And it got to the point where when I got to know Johnny, and they changed his shift to a later afternoon and night shift, so it was after 5 o'clock, everybody had left, Johnny would invite me into the control room.
Oh, you had to love that.
Johnny taught me how to run the board, how to do everything else, and his brother, Jim, is actually the one who trained me. Once I got, back in that day, you used to have to have a license to get into broadcasting. You couldn't even take the test until you were 16 years old. So I took the test actually 2 days after my 16th birthday.
You were chomping at the bit, weren't you?
Element 9, which you had to pass. Got a waiver and took it again and passed it and got my license. My birthday's in December. I got my license in January of whatever my 16th birthday was, and went on the air that night with a postcard that said I had passed elements 1, 2, and 9. I didn't have my license, but I went on the air because Johnny had already taught me everything about the board, about the turntables, about slip queuing records, about queuing up tapes and all this other stuff. And I had died and gone to heaven right there. That's what I had wanted to do.
Since you were 12?
Yeah, since I was, or even before, when I was in 4-H and listening to all of these people. I want to be that person.
So you didn't grow up thinking, I'm going to be an accountant.
No, the broadcasting thing is really what interested me. I got my license. I got on the radio. Then I get into high school. It was like, where do we go from here? This is fun.
Yeah.
And I'm like, And Dad and I would have that conversation, and Mom, it was like, what are you going to do now? You look at your older brother, see what they're doing, see what your friends are doing, see what, blah, blah, blah. They're working, doing stuff that I'm not interested in.
Did your parents embrace the fact that you liked, or were they kind of confounded by it? I don't really see.
No, I think they were with all of us. If this is what you want to do, we will move heaven and earth to make it happen for you. Dad took me to work at 5 o'clock in the morning to sign at the radio station on the air. Dad would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and take me downtown so I could be there at 5 o'clock. Then he would go back and go to work at Mayfield's.
Wow.
Now, he told me you can find your own way home. But if you need to, you can walk from downtown to the Mayfield's plant, which is right outside of town, and I get off at 4 o'clock, and you can sit in the car and wait until I get off, and I'll take you home. But it was that kind of atmosphere, it was that kind of family unit that whatever you wanted to do, I had 3 brothers that all went into the Air Force. They spent time in the Air Force. I didn't want to do that. That was during Vietnam. I did not want to do that.
Oh, no, you don't.
And God looks over dumb people sometimes and crazy people. And I was a sophomore. I thought maybe I'll teach. Maybe I could teach. That kind of goes hand in hand with this. So out of high school, I'm going to go to Tennessee Temple University over here in Chattanooga. I'm going to get a degree in elementary education, and I'm going to be a teacher.
I never knew this.
I went 1 year, and that's all it lasted. Because I was working at the radio station at that time, and I was doing everything at that radio station. I was playing records, I was doing news, I was doing sports, I was broadcasting ball games, I was selling advertising, everything you can do. So I was making pretty good money at that time. So I start looking at what teachers are paid. And if I stayed 3 more years and got my degree, I could then be making what I'm making now working at the radio station.
So you start to see broadcasting as a career.
After 1 year I left there, I went to Cleveland State, and after a quarter there, I was like, I still don't know exactly what I'm, maybe education, maybe something else, I don't know. But I just couldn't, I was still working in radio this whole time. I worked at an A&P food store when I was in high school, sacking groceries and stocking the shelves. I love David Knox, who hired me there, but this is not a career. I worked for Mike Goodfriend before he turned his place into the outlet stores, which later became Goodies. I loved working for Mike. And this was upscale men's clothing, and I really liked that. You get to meet a lot of people. You got to really wear some nice clothes.
Well, it had a good effect on you. You were
I learned a lot. I learned what Florsham shoes and Hart Schaffner and Mark shoes were, and I had no idea what those things were. But I also learned that my paycheck was a little bit smaller every Friday because I actually had to pay for those clothes I was wearing during the week. So after a quarter or 2 quarters, it was like I'm full speed ahead with this radio gig, and as they say, the rest is history.
So you graduate high school. You decide to get into radio. Are you staying in Athens? Where's your next radio?
One of my brothers lived in Dallas, and he was sales manager at an FM radio station there. And he called me one day and said, do you want to come to Dallas? This was in 1969 or 70. Do you want to come to Dallas? And it was like, well, yeah. We need a midnight to 6 a.m. DJ. Great.
Oh, yeah.
I'm there. I'll be there tomorrow. So I go to Dallas and spent about 3 months out there, maybe 6 months at that radio station. And that was fun. It was different being in Dallas, but you're working at midnight and you're working till 6, then you're going home and sleeping, and you're getting up and you're living with your brother and his wife. Then you're getting ready to go back to the radio station. And we lived in Irving, and I'm driving into Dallas, and it's like No, not so much. Not so much. I'm going home. So I go back home to the people and the places that I knew.
Yeah. Which station? Back to
Actually, when I went back, I was at WLAR when I left. When I came back, Bill had replaced me. He didn't have an opening, so I called John Frew, who was the general manager at Wixie, WYXI, the country music station. So I go back to Wixie and worked for them until management changed at LAR, and Tom Otterburn hired me there to basically run the place, and I did that until Tom decided. I got married in 72, and we were rocking and rolling. We were kicking butt and taking names. The station was doing absolutely great. And then Tom decided he apparently didn't need me anymore. So at 11:30 a.m. on a shift that runs from 5 a.m. until noon, at 11:35 during the newscast, I got fired.
And you still had 20 minutes to go.
But I didn't go back on. He had brought another guy in to work my last, and he fired the guy that was on after me as well. And then we got together and called the guy who worked the night shift. So Johnny Kaufman, who just finished up his brilliant career of doing Mac-Minn high school football in Athens, Johnny came in at 11:30 to replace me. Then he had to work and replace Steve Sherry. Ooh. And we had called Stan Barrett over in Rockwood and told him what was going on, so he called in and quit. So Kaufman was still working at midnight that night.
24-hour shift.
But you know what? Had that not happened, I might still have been there.
Yeah.
Because we were doing so well. I just got married, and it's like, this is heaven.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about where it leads you, because I love the fact that you identified, public speaking, and you're a radio nerd, and 12-year-old riding his bike down to the radio station, just to what, gets in your blood. So you're working in Athens. It's perfect for you. But how do you end up in Chattanooga?
Well, that was it. Like I said, if Tom had not fired me, and I don't know that I've used that word to speak about my career until just now.
Wow.
But I was fired. Yeah. There's no doubt about it.
Well, every good broadcaster's been fired. You
either have been or you will be. So it's going to happen. First person I called was Tom Rowland in Cleveland.
Yeah, the former mayor.
Tom and I had been friends. He worked at WCLE at the time, and he said, "We don't have anything open. Bill Tomlinson over at WBAC might. No, we don't have anything." Okay, I need to work somewhere.
Because you just got married too.
I just got married. Yeah. Let me call Perkle. So I'll call Johnny. Johnny at that time was managing the University of Tennessee radio station in Knoxville. And I go up to Knoxville, I cut an audition tape, which I didn't have because I had no idea that I might need it at some point to get a job. We cut a tape. Johnny says, "I can't hire you because I hire UT students. That's what this station is all about. And I can't stand the music, and I know you wouldn't like it either." So he said, "Let me get you a job." A couple of days later, Perkle calls me back, and he said, "I got you a job. A buddy of mine, Mike Patrick, that worked here for a long time. We worked together at WNOX. He's looking for somebody. He likes your voice. You'll be doing news for him and sports, too." Mm-hmm. "Great. Where is this? Is it at WNOX in Knoxville?" "No, it's WJZ. "I don't know that straight." He said, "It's in Detroit, Michigan."
Oh, my goodness. I didn't know this.
"I'm not going to Detroit, Michigan."
Yeah.
"No way. Johnny, I love you. Thank you. No way." So I called just out of the blue. I thought, I still need a job.
Yeah.
I had met Bill Nash a couple of years before that. And I decided I'll come to Chattanooga and I'll drop in on Bill Nash over at WDOD. He had an opening 2 days before I dropped in. So he hired me on the spot and put me to work at WDOD. And I was there doing Mocs ball games, football and basketball games, and I had an air shift, and I was doing news, and I was right back in my element again. Tommy Reynolds, who was Dr. Shock at Channel 9 Television, also worked an afternoon shift or a weekend shift at the radio station. He was the program director at Channel 9. He called me and he said, Darrell, would you be interested in doing the 11 o'clock sportscast here at the TV station? Bill McAfee, who's our sports guy, doesn't want to do the 11 o'clock anymore. Okay. Yeah, sounds like fun. I'll do that. Let me see if it's okay. I asked Bill Nash. Nasty said, yeah, go ahead. As long as it doesn't interfere with your morning job here, it's fine. Knock yourself out. So I did. I was still working. I was at the radio station at WDOD at 5 a.m., and I got off there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and back in at the TV station at about 8 o'clock to get the 11 o'clock ready. Gene Randall, who later became the CNN's White House, our chief Washington, he was our anchor at that time. Judge Jackie Schulten also worked there at that time. Gary Wardlaw, Roy Crowley, Gil Norwood was the news director at that time. So I go over and I'm doing the 11 o'clock, and I told him I'll do this up until basketball season. And I'm doing the Mocs basketball games on radio. And I will be traveling with the Mocs, and I'll be doing those basketball games. So come basketball season, I had to give up my 11 o'clock gig. That was in 1974, in the fall, winter of 74. 1975, in the middle of the year, Tommy calls me again and says, Darrell, the times are changing. This television station is fourth in the ratings. And I said, Tommy, there's only 3 stations here. He says, my point exactly. Fuqua Broadcasting owned the station at that time. And Tommy says they're about to make wholesale changes. They've hired Jane Dowden to be the general manager. Okay, I don't know who that is. She's with Showbiz out of Nashville. They do the Glenn Campbell show. They do the Hager Brothers show. They do all these other shows. She's our new general manager. I think we've hired a new news anchor, and we're changing everything. And we want you to be the sports guy. Would you come over and meet Jane and talk to her? So I go over and meet Jane. On the way in to meet Jane, I met this tall drink of water coming out of the building as I was going in. His name was Bob Johnson.
Yeah.
He introduced himself. We stood in the parking lot and talked for about a half hour. They had to come outside and get me because I had an appointment with Jane that I was already a half hour late for. And Bob and I just connected because of our backgrounds in music and in radio and everything else. Go up and talk to Jane, and she said, I've seen your work, and we're replacing Mr. McAfee. And Bob Johnson is going to be our news anchor. And we're going to do this the Monday after Labor Day. That's when our premiere day will be. Can you handle it? Yes, I think I'll take the job. So I go back to the radio station. Actually, during the time, Tom Toller at Channel 3 had called and wanted me to come to do an audition tape for them to do the news. They basically offered me be the news guy at Channel 3 or be the sports guy at Channel 9. So I go to Bill Nash, and I said, Bill, I have a dilemma. I'm leaving, but I don't know where I'm going. So Bill told me, he said, Darrell, I love you. It's a great opportunity for you. If you take the news job at Channel 3, you're going to be back over here in a year asking for your job back. You're not a news guy.
Yeah.
You're a sports guy. Take the job at Channel 9, and I'll never see you again except on TV.
That's great advice.
It was. So I took the job, and that was probably in April or May.
And you don't premiere until Labor Day.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
In June, Tommy called me, Gil Norwood calls and says, can you come to work a little earlier than we had planned? Okay, yeah, sure. What would that be? Tonight? I'm on the air at the time at the radio station, and he said, Mr. McAfee has found out about all the changes, and he's walking out of the building right now as we speak. So that was June 5th. I went to work full time, and I worked through the 4th of July at both jobs.
Wow.
I got about 2 hours sleep a day because I was at the radio station at 5 o'clock, then over to the TV station when I got off and worked till midnight, go home, get a couple of hours sleep, and back at the radio station.
And that's when they put together the anchor team that took the station to number one.
It was. We were fourth. You know this. People listening would not know probably. We had blanks at the 6 and 11 o'clock. That means not enough people are watching to get 1 point.
We called it chicken scratch.
Exactly. We were horrible. The product was not all that bad. It was just we were against Mort Lloyd at one of the stations, and I don't remember who at the other stations. But they just couldn't get any ground. And during this whole time, ABC was changing too. ABC really, Fred Silverman, I guess, had taken over operations there, and their programming started changing.
The advent of Happy Days and shows like that.
Exactly.
The network's so important.
What was the Farrah Fawcett and
$6 Million Man.
The $6 Million
Charlie's
Man.
Angels.
Charlie's Angels, yeah. All of those shows went on, and they were terrific. We went on the air. We didn't have a weather guy, and I had known Don Welch since before I came to Chattanooga.
Did you know him through broadcasting?
Yes,
or
I did.
Just being in the?
He was working at Channel 3, and I was the Channel 3 news stringer in Athens.
Gotcha.
Carried a camera around and shot some film and put it on a bus and sent it to them to process and put on the newscast. That's what I did there.
You didn't just email it?
We were working on email.
Yeah,
we didn't have Wi-Fi at the time, so we didn't do that. But I mentioned to Jane that we might get in touch with, I said, it's a good friend of mine. He's got a great on-air presence, background in radio just like Bob and I do, background in music just like we do. It might be good. So, he's probably got a contract. And I said, I know Don. He doesn't have a contract. He doesn't sign no stinking contracts. So she calls Don, and that's the next week he was working, the three of us, me, Bob, and him. This was the week after Labor Day, or shortly thereafter. Anyhow, by the November ratings book, we were together on the air and started to make a little ground. 1 year later, we were number one in the 11 o'clock ratings book. And a year after that, which they said at the time, and I don't know if it's true or not, and still a record, the biggest improvement in television history, going from blanks at the 11 o'clock show to number one a year later from November to November.
Yeah, it doesn't move that fast.
No.
You know,
and 1 year later, we're number one at 6 o'clock.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to besides, obviously you and Bob and Don, but what was the chemistry that got people watching?
The word that we kept hearing over and over and over again is you guys are like family.
Yeah.
You're like, and we felt like we genuinely loved each other, the three of us. And Bob's wife at the time, Lee Johnson, was the promotions manager, and she promoted the heck out of the three of us. We were everywhere.
Did she do that crazy football promo?
She did the crazy football promo. She did a promo where Bob is getting a cat off of the roof of a house.
I remember that. Yeah.
We did a promo where we had a lady walking down the street and she drops her groceries. And we were right behind her and we picked her groceries up. It was those sort of things that people love. We were all three walking down the street in South Pittsburgh smoking a pipe. Bob and Don smoked a pipe. I did not. Except for that promo. I started smoking a pipe after that. And
any truth to the rumor that you three were the inspiration for the movie Anchorman?
I cannot confirm or deny that. But we had so much fun doing so many things. Lee would never turn anything down when she got phone calls from people who wanted us to come and do something.
You were out in the community.
We were in the community.
As a local TV station should be, or local radio station should be. That's kind of...
Isn't that a great idea?
Yeah, maybe someone will think of that someday. But, you know, the point I want to get back to is you grew up with these five brothers.
Yeah.
And everyone's off in the Air Force or doing other things. And you got bit by a broadcasting bug that you tried to ignore because it didn't seem like a career is what I'm imagining.
Exactly.
You're like, how am I going to make a life out of this? And all of a sudden, it does.
I mentioned, and I think the thought probably crossed my mind even when I was in, what do they call it, grammar school, grade school?
Yeah.
Or back then, I thought I had really admired both of my teachers. And I say both of them. I had two teachers for 8 grades. I admired how they did their work, how they spent an hour here and an hour here in front of classes doing things. And that intrigued me because it was someone who was in charge of a situation, or this is my little world here, and I'm sharing it with these young children. I'm feeding their mind. Okay, I think that's where the idea of me teaching came about. But when it came down to fishing or cutting bait, it's like I don't want to put that much time and energy into something that that's really not me.
But it's really what you ended up doing. To a great degree, your broadcasting is you were up in front of that audience, sharing and teaching.
You know, I was public speaking in 5th grade.
Yeah.
I was in front of groups. I never had a fear of being in front of people, talking to people. Never. Even in radio, you imagined that you were in front of thousands of people when probably only 20 were listening.
Yeah.
You never really knew. Television is not that much different from radio in a certain respect because you still have a microphone. The only difference is there's a camera there now. There was a consultant named Ed Bewley who worked with us when we first went on the air, and he worked with me in making the transition. He had looked at the tapes of the shows that I did when I was doing just the 11 o'clock. Okay, the talent is there, the voice is there, the writing is there. The communication is not there. The contact with the people is not there. He is scared to death of that camera. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at that Associated Press story. I want you to read it over and over and over and over and over. Then I want you to lay that paper down, pick up this little cassette tape recorder, and tell that tape recorder what you just read. Hit the rewind button on the tape recorder and write that, because you have now translated the written word into something that is a conversation. And that's what you need to put on the air. If you make grammatical mistakes, it doesn't matter. You're communicating with the people on the other side of the TV. And he, to this day, Panky, my younger brother, will not forgive me. And Pank, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I love you dearly. But Ed Bewley says, forget the idea that there's a camera out there. Pretend that that camera is a person, and you're talking one-to-one with that person. So since the next day that I went on the air, I was talking to Panky. In every television show I did, I was always talking to Panky, because I figured if I can make him understand what I'm saying, anybody can understand.
What great advice, though. I mean, that is because writing for the ear is different than writing for the eye. And that's what a lot of people don't realize in trying to put a script together.
Absolutely.
It's much different than it. I want to get to a couple things before we run out of time. Talk about Santa for All Seasons in your golf tournament and what you did with that.
It kind of fell into my lap.
Yeah.
It was one of those things of kind of like going into television. When I got up that morning, I never thought about doing that. Marcia Boyd with the worked for the Tennessee Department of Children's services. And some of her people had come to the TV station and said they needed to do a fundraiser. They were a one-trick pony. All they did was take care of foster kids. By taking care of them, I mean providing for them financially in ways that the state and other governmental agencies did not take care of them. If they needed to go on a field trip and needed to take $5 in to give their teacher for a field trip, they didn't have $5. Chances are their foster parents didn't have $5 to give them. That's where Santa for All Seasons came in. If they were going to a prom, well, the girl needs a nice dress. She can't afford it. She's a foster kid. Foster parents can't afford it. Go to Marcia Boyd's house and try one on that a foster kid had won the year before, or a new one that we just bought this year. They didn't have the resources to do that. They were struggling. So they wanted to do a fundraiser. And they had talked to the people at the TV station. And when I got to work that afternoon, I was pulled into the conversation and said, we want to do a golf tournament. Okay, fine. What do we need to do? And they went over the whole thing of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And 23 years later, we had raised about $250,000, 100% profit. I don't think it was 100% profit, but all of that money went to the foster kids.
Yeah.
No administration cost on it. We paid a little bit here and there to rent the golf course and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you've got some costs associated with it.
But the kids, the only drawback was we could not use those kids in promoting the thing. Yeah. Because of sort of like a HIPAA law or something like that. These are foster kids. But we had letters from the foster kids. We had a letter from a kid. He had been in the foster program for a little over a year. And he wanted to go home during Christmas or a holiday or something like that. He was here in this area living with his foster parents, who may have also been his grandparents or something. But his family, his mother, his dad, whoever, lived up in the Tri-Cities area. He wanted to go see him. Santa for All Seasons got him a bus ticket.
Wow.
To go up and see and spend the weekend. That kid wrote the most heart-rendering thank you letter that I have ever read.
That makes it all worth it, doesn't it?
It did. I mean, that to me made me go and you saw as much work as I myself put into that tournament.
That wasn't the week before planning. You were planning that the day after the tournament.
It took probably 6 months of hard work. We finally got to the point where we put the right people in the right places to do the different things, getting volunteers together, the last year we had more prizes than we had players.
Yeah.
It was like any of you left that didn't get a prize, come up and get one. We have plenty of them left. But it just got to the point where, and all golf tournaments did for a little while, they hit a little snag. Nobody wanted to pay $150 to go play in a tournament. So we decided the budget for Santa for All Seasons was however much money we raised in that tournament, which was around $20,000. Most good years, $20,000 to $30,000. And they were restricted by the state. Things started changing at the state level as far as charities go. Everything had to go through the state. Santa for All Seasons was not through the state, and I'm not even sure to this day that Santa for All Seasons exists anymore.
Yeah.
I understand. Before we shut it down, they told me that every child who at that time was what they called in the system, and they age out at age 18 or 16 or whatever it was, they had enough money in the bank to take care of all kids currently in the program until they aged out of the program through the needs that they have that they generally give these kids every year. And that was a fund that they set up in my name for that to take care of. So it's like, okay, we've got these kids covered. We're not making any money here, so let's shut it down.
What a tremendous legacy, though. And it goes back to what you're talking about earlier of the duty of a broadcast station to be involved in the community and
absolutely.
To make it better
Absolutely.
for the community.
They had...
you should be proud.
Everybody at the station, and Jerry Lingerfeld, I got to give him kudos, the general manager at the time. Jerry was 100%. He and I had a fight once because he wanted to change the charity because of a charity he was involved in. And I said, Jerry, fine, go ahead and do that. Just find somebody else to do sports for you at 6 and 11 o'clock.
Good for you.
He said, okay, conversation's over.
And Jerry was a smart guy, too.
Jerry.
Before I get to my last question, Darrell, I do want to remind our listeners who makes all of this possible. And it's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, my last question for you, and I do ask everyone this. What would you tell that 25-year-old Darrell Patterson is important for a happy life?
Ooh, for a happy life. Well, define happy. That's the first thing I'll tell them. Define happy. What is happy for you? Because what's happy for you is not what's happy for everyone else.
Great point.
Set your sights. Nothing is too high. Almost everything is too low. You can be what you and it's so true today, more so than it was 50 years ago when I started out on this venture. You can do whatever you want to do. The world is your oyster, so to speak. Find something, set your sights on it, and go get it. Work like hell at sometimes, but go get it. Don't ever give up. Don't let disappointments set you back. It's just a bump in the road. In the end, you can thank me for it.
I've so enjoyed catching up with you.
Oh, I love it.
Talking about your career.
Can we do this again like next week, next month?
Absolutely.
Make it monthly?
You know what?
I'll give you a special rate and everything.
I might bring some old 45s and just quiz you on the song and the producer. And
I'll give you some of my my radio air check tapes.
I would like that.
You will be impressed.
I would like that. Well, again, thank you. You're a good friend, and I really admire everything you've done.
I've had a great life. Me and Jimmy Stewart have had a wonderful life.
Oh, what a way to end it. Thanks, Darrell.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.